Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially fantasy football playoff time, and I am officially advancing in 75% of my dynasty slash redraft leagues, and 22.6% of my best ball teams are advancing as well. Now it's playoff time, and that means that any edge you can get is absolutely pivotal at this point. And the easiest way to get that weekly edge in redraft and dynasty is to make sure your defense for fantasy is really good. Now, these matchups this week, there's a lot of good ones, there's a lot of mixed ones, but of course, we're going through week 15's top 12 defense rankings. And I'm one of the only fantasy YouTubers who covers defense multiple times a week. So make sure to go down there and drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, getting into our first tier, we've got our typical top two, the Seahawks and the Texans at number 1 and 2, but we've also got two other defenses in this top tier, mostly because of matchup. With the Seahawks, I at one time did say I do think the Indy matchup would have been ideal, whether it was Daniel Jones or not. Now I'm convinced this is the best matchup of the week. The Seahawks defense, first of all, do they really need an introduction at this point? I mean, their defense is absolutely phenomenal. They have 41 sacks through 13 games, 15 interceptions, 3 defensive touchdowns now, and now 3 special teams touchdowns. This defense is unbelievable from top to bottom. They've been crushing everybody. So now you either have one of two things that's going to happen. Maybe Riley Leonard is cleared in time, or maybe they play a 44-year-old Phillip Rivers who's been in retirement for years now. I mean, it's so crazy. But either way, guys, the Colts are in shambles. They know this. That's why they're calling up a quarterback and trying to get him out of retirement. This is a disaster situation. So at this point, it kind of made it easier for me to just put the Seahawks at number 1 because that's what I always wanted to do anyways. The Texans defense at number 2, they're taking on the Cardinals. Now, if you know one thing about the Cardinals in recent weeks is that Jacoby Brissett has been a garbage time master. Like, he has been so good in garbage time just driving down the field. And, that typically puts a damper on defenses in fantasy. Now, here's my prediction for this one. The Texans will put them in a chokehold. And I don't think they're going to allow for many garbage time touchdowns. And even if they do, let's say they do, I just don't see a way where Jacoby Brissett gets out of this game clean and untouched or without interceptions thrown, because this team has been ball hawking lately. 36 sacks in 13 games, 15 interceptions as well. They're just a awesome unit from top to bottom as well. I mean, their secondary terrorized Patrick Mahomes last week, and I tried to tell people, it wasn't the best week to play Mahomes. This is not the best week to play Brissett. And I do think that either way, you cut this cake. Either they hold the Cardinals to under 14 points, or they get 17 plus, but have several turnovers in this one. I just see this one working out either way for the Texans for fantasy defense. The Eagles defense at number 3. They belong in this tier because they're playing the Raiders. Now, if you didn't watch the Monday night game versus the Eagles and the Chargers, that was an excellent performance from the defense. Cooper DeJean had Ladd McConkey locked up all game. Quinyon Mitchell had Quentin Johnston locked up all game. Their defensive line, they were getting after Justin Herbert. And you can expect basically all the same things against a far inferior opponent with the Las Vegas Raiders. And if it's Geno Smith, that's fine, whatever, he'll throw some interceptions. If it's not Geno Smith, it's actually going to get worse if it is going to be Kenny Pickett. Either way you cut this cake, once again, it's going to be a dominant performance from the Eagles. So I don't see the Raiders being able to put up more than 14 points. And again, even if they do, it'll be along with a lot of turnovers because the Eagles are on a bad losing streak. They've got talent. Maybe they get Jalen Carter back. But even if they don't, they're going to destroy the Raiders' front offensive line. And that quarterback, whoever it may be, is in complete trouble this week. The Jags defense at number 4 to round out the top tier. And they're in here because they're playing the Jets, and their defense has been really good for fantasy. The Jacksonville Jaguars defense is now a higher ranked defense on the year than the Denver Broncos are. That's because of 15 interceptions, 8 forced fumbles, a defensive touchdown, a safety, and also 2 special teams touchdowns. This Jags defense has been nice. Now, their only issue, they don't really get after the quarterback too many times. But I kind of just feel like when you factor in the Jets matchup, And the fact that it's probably not going to be Tyrod Taylor means they're not going to put up many points. Whoever their backup quarterback is wasn't very good last week, and I don't anticipate that to really change. They don't have enough weaponry. Their offensive line, while actually pretty good, is not going to be able to hold up for a quarterback who ultimately is not good enough to be a starter in the NFL. The Jags defense, they're just on a roll right now. They're also on a roll as a team. They're trying to lock up division at this point. This feels like a pretty bulletproof matchup right here. Dropping down to our next tier, we've got the Buccaneers defense at number 5, and they're going to Tampa to play the Falcons on Thursday night. Now, again, we've had a lot of mixed bags with Thursday night games from a defensive perspective. I just think of this one as, how does it not work? I mean, the Buccaneers defense, they've actually been taking a downturn lately, and they've been giving up more points than they had in previous weeks because I think their team is kind of in shambles right now. But you cannot compare that to the team that's in way worse condition with the Falcons. The Falcons are a disaster, and Kirk Cousins is absolutely atrocious as a quarterback in the NFL. He does not belong in the NFL anymore. His days are behind him. Darnell Mooney's not doing anything. Their number one threat right now is actually Kyle Pitts. Like Bijan Robinson, if you're able to key in on him, it's not going to go well. And I'm not saying that the Bucs have enough talent to stop Bijan all game, but if they get several sacks on Kirk Cousins and they hold this team to less than 17 points and maybe get a turnover or two off of Cousins, what does it matter if Bijan goes off for 150 yards and maybe a touchdown? It doesn't, because the Bucs are an opportunistic defense. They blitz really well. They also get interceptions off of those blitzes. So I just have enough trust in Todd Bowles as a schemer defensively to be able to make this a solid play for fantasy. The Bears defense is at number 6. They're taking on the Browns. So when I go through the Bears defense and the potential outcomes that could happen in this game, first of all, it's in Chicago. They're coming off a loss where it looked like they were right there to win the game against the Green Bay Packers. This is a different Bears team. Everybody understands that at this point in time. Now, the thing that worries me here is because the Bears defense has not been good for fantasy over the last several weeks. They've got a lot of injuries, particularly at that back end. And if Shedeur Sanders can play anything like he did against the Tennessee Titans, he will put up points against this team. Now, here's the problem with the Browns this week, is their offensive line has been atrocious, and the Bears' pass rush has been good this year. That's the one thing that's making me think, even if the Browns are able to put up 21 points here, I see the Bears coming out of this game with like 4 or 5 sacks. So that's kind of where I sit with this whole Bears versus Browns matchup. They've got 24 sacks this year. They also have 18 interceptions and 10 forced fumbles, meaning they're making plays necessary for fantasy football upside, and the Browns are a mistake-prone team with Shedeur Sanders. So I ultimately do think the Bears are actually going to be a good play too. The Steelers' defense is at 7 to round out this tier, and they're taking on the Dolphins on Monday night. Now, let me tell you this before I get into the matchup specifically. There's a lot riding here on the Steelers and Mike Tomlin in specific. The Steelers and Mike Tomlin, they bought themselves some breathing room from the Fire Tomlin chance against the Ravens when they beat them. But they were very close, and many would argue, including myself as a Steelers fan, they actually should have lost that game because they called back a ridiculous touchdown that would have been for Isaiah Likely. Now, here's the thing this week. If they absolutely lay an egg against Miami, there's going to be massive Fire Tomlin chants in Pittsburgh on a national stage. Tomlin doesn't want that. So I think the Steelers will put forth another really good effort against the Dolphins. Now, whether or not they create a lot of turnovers remains to be seen, but I like their chances of doing it this week. First of all, the Steelers are a top 10 defense in fantasy because of the turnovers they're able to create and because they're a blitzing team. That's what the Steelers do really well. And Tua Tagovailoa has been very turnover prone this year. And at the same time, this Dolphins offense, I still believe, even though they were able to do it against the Jets, you take this team out of their element, you put them in cold weather at this time of the year, that's typically when they're not at their best. So I do not think that the Dolphins are able to do it for too 2 weeks straight, and I do think the Steelers will have a lot of motivation in this game, and I like them this week as a defensive play. But I will make it clear, I think a lot of these defenses, particularly the Bears, particularly possibly the Buccaneers, are on waivers this week, maybe even the Eagles. You need to utilize our automatic waiver tool to go scoop these defenses up, because these defenses are probably not priority ads, which means you can get them for free after the priority waiver claims run through. So you either get up at 3 in the morning, disrupt your sleep schedule to go pick up that defense, or you use our automatic waiver tool to go grab the defense for you and sleep through the night. Keep your sleep, don't keep your sleep, it's up to you. But this is a league-winning tool that's helping people dominate right now. You'll also get access to my top 250 rankings on a weekly basis. At this point, it's probably top 280 rankings. And you'll also get access to the comparison feature and the league sync-up feature as well. And you need to utilize our weekly start-sit polls to make your decisions moving forward. Dropping down to our next tier, we've got the Packers defense at number 8. They're going to Denver to play the Broncos. So here's the way I kind of look at this matchup right here. To me, this is going to be a lower scoring game. This feels like a 17-14 type of outcome. And the Packers defense, they actually have not been great for fantasy football. Very much reminds me of the Eagles defense last year, where they're such a great defense as a whole, but they're not actually that good for fantasy, because if you look at what they've done this year, 33 sacks is great. That's a really good number. But 7 interceptions and 5 forced fumbles and 0 defensive touchdowns or safeties is the reason they're the defense number 22 right now in fantasy. So they haven't exactly been dominant from a fantasy perspective. But what they've done is hold opponents to very few points. And one thing we know about Bo Nix is he does put the ball in harm's way sometimes. So while the Broncos are usually a cleaner operation, I do think of this game as kind of one of the prove-it tests for the Denver Broncos as an offense in particular. And I do think that probably forces a turnover or two, and they probably are able to sack Bo Nix a couple of times in this game. Either way, though, I don't envision the Broncos putting up more than 20 points in this game, so I do think the Packers are able to be a solid play. And the Chargers defense is at number 9. They're going to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. Now, if you haven't noticed yet, this tier is kind of a tier where I feel like there's going to be a lot of lower scoring games. The Chargers defense just put up really good performance against the Eagles. Now, the Chargers were playing an offense that was clearly off. They've clearly been off all year. And Jalen Hurts threw 4 interceptions in that game. I don't think Patrick Mahomes is throwing 4 picks in this game. But what I do think could happen is Mahomes throws a pick or two because his receivers are betraying him. And his offensive line is also arguably on the same level of bad as the Chargers. That's the problem here, is that the Chargers pass rush, they were able to get after Jalen Hurts and generate pressure based off blitzing schemes. I envision the same thing with Mahomes because that offensive line continues to get worse on a weekly basis. So this does feel like, once again, either it's going to be a lower scoring matchup or maybe both teams put up 20, but the Chargers are able to come out with 5 sacks on Patrick Mahomes and maybe make him make a couple of mistakes. This feels like one of those types of performances for me. Now at number 10, to round out this tier, we've got the Broncos defense versus the Packers in the same matchup. I do envision this game, once again, to be a lower scoring affair. I think the Broncos will do well as a defensive unit against the Packers offense, which has been much hotter lately. You add in the return of Jaden Reed, Josh Jacobs looks healthy again, Christian Watson has really brought a whole new element to this offense. It's a little scary, but Jordan Love does put the ball in harm's way. And the Broncos secondary is absolutely fantastic. So I do ultimately think this can be one of those situations where we see actually a really good performance that's very sneaky because the Broncos come out and they put pressure on Jordan Love and they're able to make mistakes. So one of these two things is going to happen. Either it's going to be a lower scoring matchup or they're able to get some turnovers and sacks off of Love, or possibly both. This is a sneaky play, but just because of matchup and just because of the way the Packers offense has played lately, I don't have as much confidence to put them higher than this as I usually would with the Broncos defense. Dropping down to our last tier. Our last two defenses, the Panthers are at 11, and they're going to New Orleans to play the Saints. This may be the first time that they're here in the top 12 all year. I don't remember, but the Panthers, I think, deserve it at this point. First of all, they're 100% in play for the division. The Buccaneers look weak, and they're taking on a divisional opponent that is very hot and cold offensively. And even in their hottest moments, they're still not putting up more than 24 points on a weekly basis. That's the Saints cap. Tyler Suge is also a mistake-prone quarterback. He does throw interceptions, and not always is he going to run for 2 touchdowns. The Panthers defense, I've kind of highlighted this a couple times this year as well. They actually can have some sneaky good weeks in fantasy. This is a defense that, while only 18 sacks, has 12 interceptions because J.C. Horn has become a really good lockdown corner as well. So I do think there's an opportunity here for them to really screw with Tyler Suge's confidence and screw with his timing and rhythm in this game. And we all know the floor of this offense is really low. Now, these divisional matchups, I'll be honest, I don't have enough trust in the Panthers defense. I don't have enough trust in the Panthers. And I don't have enough trust that the Saints won't do good. Enough for me to put the Panthers higher on this list. But I do think they belong somewhere in here in the top 12. And I've got them at 11. And the Cowboys defense, the second straight week. And I can't believe they're still here, but they're back inside the top 12. At number 12 specifically is where they were last week, and they took a dump all over me. I don't think that's going to happen again this week. Listen, the Minnesota Vikings, yes, they just put up 34 points on the Commanders. Well, guess what? The Commanders are finished. The Eagles keep losing games, and the Cowboys find themselves very, very involved in the divisional race. That's right, the divisional race. If the Cowboys can pull out a really good performance against the Minnesota Vikings, which I don't think is that hard, I think it's going to amount to a good defensive performance. If they can generate pressure and if they can stop the run, which basically most teams have done against the Vikings this year, I think the Cowboys are a solid defensive play. And I just don't think that with several more days of rest and several more days of prep, since the Cowboys were on a short week, that they're not able to stop the Vikings and hold them to fewer than 17 points in this game. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below. And if you want to see the best tips and tricks to win your fantasy football playoffs this year, click on this video right here.